They say those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And with how quickly things get archived away into the memory hole, I'm afraid that this is happening quicker than ever. Many people have never even heard of the Georgia Guidestones, let alone know that they were destroyed. You want to know what I think happened to them? I think the exact same dark and nefarious actors that were responsible for the existence of these Guidestones in the first place were the ones who destroyed them. The Georgia Guidestones were built in basically the middle of nowhere in 1980 by an unknown person. Certainly a person that had a lot of money. Enough money to build these Guidestones, expend them, keep them secret, and then disappear into existence without anybody figuring out for over 40 years. These Guidestones basically outlined the future plans of the global elite in very clear language. In fact, it was translated into multiple languages and etched in stone at this location. And there's no mystery to it. It's clear as day. Because the ultimate plan for complete and total control is to find a scapegoat for people to relinquish all of their powers and rights. The initial test run was a medical crisis to get people so fearful that they were afraid to even leave their home, and it could be justified to tell them to not leave their home, to not see their family members, to not live their life as normal. But this strategy for the long term is actually flawed. It's just a test run to see how quickly and subservient people will be in a rapid response, rapid fear situation. Because people know people, and eventually they're going to talk to each other. And if they're walking down the street and seeing other people are healthy and not having a problem as a result of this supposed crisis, this supposed emergency, eventually they might stop following the rules. You need something that can last in perpetuity forever, that you can't measure by just talking to another person, that you could go outside and they could tell you the sky is green when it is in fact actually blue, but you don't know because you don't have the 10,000 foot view. You don't know for sure. So because I think these Guidestones make it clear what the end game is. The perfect thing to blame: the weather, the planet, saving the planet. Don't you want to save the planet? Because the future where the elite have complete and total control over all people and all of humanity allows them to blame something that you can't objectively measure on your own. You have to trust the science. You have to trust the experts. You have to trust the people that know, that have the satellites. You can't just measure it yourself by talking to other people or looking into your own health or your own body or knowing yourself. It's just the planet. Who's going to measure that? Only the experts can tell you. Because here's what I think is going to happen. Every aspect of your free and independent life, every right that you have, will be ultimately sacrificed to the state, to the establishment, and thus the global elite who appoints them under the guise of saving the earth, under the guise of climate, under the guise of saving the planet and preserving our only home. There is no planet B. The first and most obvious step of this process is to get people into machinery, technology, and equipment that can be controlled and ultimately switched off by centralized control. Think your computer, your cell phone, your access to the internet of things that's in your home, your refrigerator, your washing machine, your digital thermostat. Then, of course, obviously, your car. Most people are connected to electricity through a controlled grid, so they can already do that. And then the next step would be water, which a lot of people in urban areas already are. But the well water, which is where the rest of the people are, that represents a threat or a loophole that they need to find a way to resolve. Maybe by saying, oh, the groundwater is contaminated, they could do that. So now they can turn off your thermostat, they can control your water that goes to your house, they can turn off your car and limit the amount of mileage that your electric car would be able to travel, or by not allowing you to have power, you couldn't charge it in the first place. And there are already refrigerators that are connected to the Internet of Things. There are already refrigerators that have cameras inside that'll show you what's inside the door. So if you were to say, for example, have too much meat in there, or too much butter, or too much milk, in theory they could say, oh, you had too much in store. You're using too much. You're harming the planet. And then the last and most powerful step of all, of course, is control of the money, what you're allowed to spend money on. The vast majority of people's transactions already go through credit cards as it is. So you can go to a store and a credit card receipt can attach yourself to certain products. They're attached to SKUs. If you were to get it to be sophisticated enough, they can know exactly which products you're buying, probably in real time. This is already there, and this information is there already. The only way to do it is to try to discourage you from using paper currency by moving everybody to a digital currency, by perhaps creating a centralized federal currency like a Fed coin or something like that, where it's like, oh, your tax refund is paid in Fed coin, your stimmy is paid in Fed coin, and then people eventually start moving all of their money over there. It's easily accessible everywhere, or maybe it gains interest or whatever on the state. And they could say things like, oh, we'll pay you interest, or you have to pay your taxes using this specific currency, or you have to keep a certain amount of money in there, or whatever is the case. And just like that, they could phase out the central banks, they could phase out all of the independent banks, certainly, and they could phase out cash in general. They've been able to say that cash is poison. Cash has the mysterious poison on it. It's got the illness on it. Anybody remember them doing that in 2020, 2021? I think restrictions on movement would be a very easy step as well. We already have traveler numbers. You already have to use your ID and your passport to travel. They could limit the amount of international travel you could do per year, the amount of airline miles that you could use per year. At least the ones that are public. They're not gonna limit those private jets. You know how that goes. But they're not gonna be. And then they could also measure the amount of mileage that you travel using your cell phone data or using your electric car. They could monitor the amount of miles that you're allowed to travel and say you can't go over these miles. If you go and swipe your credit card or use your coin or whatever, or you hit your passport, or you buy another plane ticket, you get rejected. To save the earth, to save the planet. Your footprint is too high. Or if you decide to go over, then you have to pay a tax to the centralized authority, which doesn't do anything. That allows the rich to travel freely with impunity as they raise the prices, and all the poor people, lower and middle class people, suffer. By using things like emergency powers or emergency authority, they've been able to pass through any number of outrageous things that the people just blindly and willfully accept. So in the theory, if they were to say, hey, the weather, the planet is some type of emergency, you now have to do all these things. Many people would comply, especially because they would use the emotional manipulation of, oh, you're not doing good for the community. You don't care about future generations. You don't care about the planet. You don't care about the underprivileged, the people that live in the urban areas, or the people that don't have enough money or whatever. It's unfair. Oh, you don't want to be a person who's anti some other class of people, are you? You think you're better than them? They could just smear you publicly like they've already been doing about any other number of issues. And they'll do it the same way they do everything else. They say that they're coming for the rich, right? So they'll say the rich can't own more than 25 cars. Then it'll be 22 cars, then 20 cars, then 15 cars, then 10 cars, then 5 cars, then 2 cars, then 1 car. And the same thing will go for any other number of things. Jet skis, boats, vehicles, square footage in your house, amount of electricity or water you can consume. It's so clear. But the rich and the powerful and the elite, they will have loopholes. They'll know that, oh, if you donate X amount of whatever to the community, then it's better. Oh, if you donate some farmland, if you donate some money, if you pay your fee, if you pay your tax or whatever. So they'll just pay for them to have access to all of those things. Money that they'll have such an easy way of getting a hold of, because everybody else will be controlled. It'll be all controlled by the centralized authority. So they'll have endless amounts of money. Paying a fee or whatever else won't matter. And they'll be able to be celebrated in the media because they own all that anyways. Then eventually, under the guise of the emergency, the crisis, they'll start saying people that live in rural areas need to sacrifice their land because they have too much of a footprint. They're using too much land, they have too many crops, they have too many animals, too much livestock or whatever, and they're using too much gas to get in and out of town, and they'll start forcing people to move towards urban areas, to be centralized, easier to control, easier to get on their grid and be under the thumb of the state. And then in addition to that, they'll lose their independence. And then they'll start saying, oh, we need to dedicate that land to preservation. We need to preserve that land. And more of the land will be centralized to the bureaucracy. And they'll start owning all of those rural farmlands and all of those rural areas. And the people will start moving closer and closer together by force. And they won't have to do it by force, like going into your house and saying, you need to move down into the city. They'll just say, we're not going to send power out there. We're not going to allow water to go out there. Oh, you're only allowed to travel 60 miles per day or 70 miles or 150 miles per week or per month or whatever. So the people that live in the rural areas, their cars won't have the range to get them to the products and services that they need. So they'll be stuck. They'll find ways to convince them, aka force them, to do it on their own accord. They won't have to go and physically move them out. Now, I'm not some super genius coming up with this theory. If you look at literally what they say, if you read the books that they put out, if you listen to the words that they say, if you read things like those Georgia Guidestones, it lays this out clearly. They want less people, they want more preservation of the planet or whatever, or at least that's what they're going to tell you, and they're going to use that to control and absorb every power, every independent right that you have, and it's all going to be for the good of the theoretical planet. And meanwhile, the global elite that appoint all of the politicians that issue all of these controls over your life, well, they'll have them in their back pocket, and they'll come in and out of office just like they do now. And then all the people that have all the real money, they'll just pay the fees, pay the fines, or whatever, and they'll have their own way of getting around all of these restrictions and rules. They'll fly with impunity, they'll yacht with impunity, they'll travel around with no problem, they'll have plenty of access to all the stuff that they need. And all of the lower and middle class, all of the peasants, they'll get centralized, they'll be controlled, and they won't even know the freedom their ancestors once had.